Hi everyone, this is Donnie Chan from www.ThisWeekIn.Asia. We're a source for news and interviews with leaders, game changers, and risk takers from around Asia. Today I have Joey Chung of the News Lens. The News Lens is a Chinese news platform where readers can receive unbiased news from different angles, and they can also share or even engage in debates on matters of interest. The News Lens have garnered notice from notable news outlets such as the Tech in Asia, and have recently secured Series A funding. Now, thank you for being with us, Joey, today. We're very excited to have you with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. Now, I want to separate today's interview into two parts. The first part, we would like to talk about your company and kind of showcase it. But the second part, I would really like to talk about the man that worked at a fashion house in New York, Ralph Lauren, and from going from there to UBS Investment Bank, to being a reporter and columnist for the Taipei Times. And we also graduated from Harvard Business School with an MBA and also published 6 books. How did you do it and how did you find the time? But first, let's talk about the News Lens. So can you please introduce the News Lens and what it does and what problem are you guys trying to solve?
Sure. So I guess in a nutshell, we're trying to, starting from Taiwan first, and then Greater China, and then Asia, and then hopefully the international Chinese audience. We want to be the platform for as fair and rational news as possible, and also opinions, columns, videos, and the entire mobile experience for the social media digital generation. So I think the problem that we're trying to solve is many people living in Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Greater China think that a lot of the media outlets over here are either very, very biased, very extreme, or have their political or corporate agenda. So our running joke in the company is we're basically a bunch of 20 or 30-year-old kids that are not happy with the current media environment. And instead of spending time pointing fingers, blaming and complaining about it, we might as well try and create the media company that we want to see ourselves. So we're trying to create a clean, as fair and objective, as balanced as possible media environment for the young 20 to 40 or 20 to 50 digital generation. So the joke is, if you're anyone that still wakes up and walks over and buys a newspaper or wakes up at 7 a.m. to watch CNN morning news, then you're probably not our core audience. Our core audience is someone who has an iPhone, iPad, and computer, gets all of their information and news digitally, and is used to being on the go and has a lot of social media presence. So we want to be that platform for eventually that entire Chinese population for anything that's relevant, fair, no sensationalism. So we don't put any junk up there. The entire ideal was we want to create that valuable media experience that we want to see. So no junk, no cute YouTube video or some random taxi crash video, nothing like that. But as fairly as possible. One of our spirits internally is it's up to for the reader to decide himself. We're not trying to brainwash you. We have no corporate or political agenda. You can read our news, read our opinions, read our columns. You don't have to like it, but you can decide yourself.
So you guys were sick and tired of the clutter, the gutter news that you guys have seen in news outlets in Taiwan. So that's what inspired the idea is through all this mess, you guys want to create something that everybody can really just grab onto and it's like a meaty part of things, right? So what were the challenges of getting started with getting involved in something like that? Of course, there might be some sort of pushbacks from these news outlets that they might say, hey, like, this is our content, are you guys legitimately using our contents in their rights and publishing it and using it for yourselves?
No, actually, that was never really an issue. I think that if there were any pushback, it was usually in the sense that we would pitch this to investors, we would discuss this with legacy media or big media players, and they would always say, "Oh, we applaud you guys. We're very happy to see that young people are finally taking a stand and trying to change something positively." So, from a person-to-person standpoint, we very much respect what you guys are trying to do. But there's always a but. There's always a but, right? And the but would always come in the sense that, but are you sure this will succeed? Are you sure there will be readers? Are you sure this will be able to monetize eventually? Because if you think about it from an economic standpoint, the whole reason why there's gutter journalism is because supply and demand. People want that stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
So you're basically telling me that you know exactly what is popular right now, but you're going to go do the exact opposite, and you want my money as an investor to help do that? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think that was the biggest pushback. I mean, everyone respected the ideals, but how do you actually do it on a pragmatic level?
So to talk about one of the pushback was, is it going to make money? Now, what's the revenue business model built into the news lens right at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think for the first 1 or 2 years for any media company, making revenue and immediate profit is not the number one priority. It's always to build that user base as fast and as big as possible. And I think we've been pretty successful in expanding our user base as fast as we can. That being said, I think phase two will be proving whether or not we can monetize. And at first, I think any business model for media, it's usually one of two. It's usually membership, subscriptions, or ad sales of any variation and form. So for us, it's still very similar to that. Banner ads, video ads, mobile ads, app ads, campaigns, advertorials, sponsorships. That's one way. And I think in the next 6 months, we'll start experimenting with premium paid content and membership. So for us, it's still like that. We also have major events roughly twice a year, and those are paid events. And so far, they've been pretty well as well, going pretty well as well.
Can you share with us the viewership numbers?
Yeah. For example, last month, our monthly unique readers per month was roughly around 5 million. And of that 5 million, roughly close to 4 million is from Taiwan. So Taiwan amounts to about 70 to 75% of our total traffic. And then Hong Kong amounts to about 400,000, Southeast Asia about 300,000, and the rest of the international territories, mainly the US, Canada, Australia, the places with a huge Chinese overseas population, they amount to about 400,000.
So because you guys are not given that gutter news, like the type of media that people look for, how are you guys able to get so much viewership numbers? What are you guys doing that makes you guys stand out, and how are you guys able to get yourself into the eyes of viewers?
Well, I think twofold. Number one, most of the other digital media platforms come from legacy media, right? They are your major media company that has a very successful TV station or newspaper or magazine, and they're only simply copying and pasting whatever content they have digitally. So that's good and bad. You immediately have a brand to build on, but at the same time, digital will never be your first focus. I think for us, we're one of the few and one of the early mass media directed companies that everything we did from day one was designed to capitalize on social media viral generation. So every content, every picture, every audience, every topic, every discussion, everything was connected to Facebook, Twitter, Weibo, Weixin, all of the social media components within a greater greater China context. And we were very focused. So everything that we did had to be somehow focused on driving traffic on a digital platform. So that's number one. And number two, we think about it in a way that's, let's say our average reader is a 30-year-old Taipei person working in finance. Then if you're legacy media, then you think, okay, marketing would be, let's buy some posters on the side of a bus. Let's buy an ad at 8 p.m. weekly news, right? So we have no money. We're a startup. So our way of thinking about it is, okay, if our target audience is a 30-year-old white collar working in Taipei or Hong Kong or Singapore, then from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., how do we deliver convenient, helpful news service to him? So from a digital standpoint, so it's usually how do we go into partnership with news apps, right? How do we go into partnership with HTC or smartphones? How do we become included in all Microsoft operating systems? How do we have our video news in all the taxis, buses, convenience stores, Watsons, McDonald's in Taiwan? And that's what we're doing right now. So I guess we like to joke that we want to be like the girl next door. You kind of accidentally lift your head and you see her kind of drift by. It's not in your face. We don't want to be in your face legacy media. We want to be someone that you see by accident, but you're happy to see that person.
But you can't stop looking away.
Yeah, ideally, if we do our job right.
That's right. So has that been paying off? Where have the growth been seen? I mean, right now you guys are expanding to more Southeast Asia, and even I see you on your website. There's a Hong Kong version. So where have the growth been seen?
Yeah, so I think Taiwan will still have some potential for growth for the next year, definitely. Hong Kong office we opened about 4 months ago. So Hong Kong will be a very big focus for us going forward, naturally because of the traditional Chinese, so organic step forward into that market. Southeast Asia coverage, we started having about 3 months ago. It's still part-time, so there's no separate site just yet. But we think there's a lot of potential there. In terms of Greater China or Southeast Asia, that entire big China picture. And I'm very excited to wait for our international launch in about a month. End of July, we'll have an international edition. So when you go into our site, it will be separated into Taiwan, Hong Kong, and international edition, where all of the international edition, the content will be designed specifically for all the overseas Chinese. You could be a second-generation immigrant, you could be someone sent by an Asia company to the US, or you could have immigrated to London, but you still want to know what's going on in Greater China, in Asia. You still want to follow up with what's relevant. So you still want to know, what are the important news going on in Hong Kong and Taiwan? What's the startup industry thinking about in Beijing? What's the finance industry thinking about in Hong Kong or Singapore? And we still want to be that platform for all these people. And so that international edition, and all the content will be in bilingual as well. It'll be all English. Yeah, English and Chinese, because usually second-generation immigrants, they might not read Chinese that well. Right?
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask next. Was like, why did you guys choose to stick with all Chinese at the moment?
Well, because for now, Taiwan, Hong Kong, people still read Chinese, right? But the next step will be to cross that language barrier. And of course, there might be a lot of Chinese people that want to learn English. So that bilingual part will be very interesting. We're very excited to see what happens.
I see. Now, what are the future? So your future plans are for it to expand. Now, in terms of Series A, what I really want to get into is what our viewers want to know is how were you able to get your company in front of investors to obtain that Series A, which is what we've been reading is it's an undisclosed amount, but it's 1.22 million US. How were you able to get your company in front of these vital investors?
Well, I think what sets us apart was from day one, we were very careful. From the first day, everything was planned out. So we did not want to be pigeonholed as a regional startup. We don't want to be another Taiwan app startup or another Hong Kong mom and pop startup. So from day one, everything was focused to be as international as possible, as quickly as possible, and that way you're gunning for the international investors. And if we're trying to be a media company that is trying to be proud of the fact that we have no political or corporate agenda. It's actually very important to have international investors to kind of prove that you're not being controlled or influenced by any regional player or corporation. So number one, I think we were planning for that from day one. And number two, I think in retrospect, it was very important to prove during the first year that you are growing as fast as possible. As long as you have that momentum to grow as fast as possible, you're taking off like a rocket, then eventually they'll find you. So our early investors, our seed investors, were people from the Washington Post, and they actually found us themselves. Because we didn't know anyone. But even when we were reaching out to potential investors, we were deliberately knocking on the doors of the investors in the U.S., the investors in Japan, the investors in Singapore, et cetera, et cetera.
So, can you describe? You don't want to be pigeonholed as a company, a startup company set up in Taiwan. Were there any good and bad points? Obviously the bad point is you don't want to be held as a company set up in Taiwan. But did setting up in Taiwan help you at any point?
Sure. We're much more, most of the team right now is based in Taiwan, so we're very familiar with the legal environment, with the situation, the pros and cons. We have a lot of resources and connections in Taiwan, so that, of course, that part is good. The bad part, of course, is when you're talking to investors, not that many investors understand the Taiwan investing environment, right? The legals, the finance problems, again, the pros and cons. So it does take a while to explain everything. Imagine when you're talking to the legal counsel of a private equity or VC based out of New York. How do you explain the nuances of the Taiwan legal situation to them? So at some point, it does become very, very tiring for international investors, of course. But like I'm sure like any environment, there's always a good and bad. Exactly. So it's how do you minimize the bad and how do you capture the good?
Very, very well said. Now, I really want to move on to the second part of things, and that's just to talk about you as an entrepreneur. What was your journey? How did you get to where you are in New Zealand?
Sure. Well, I mean, my previous job was working for Sanrio. So I went to business school and graduated in '09. I worked during the summer of my MBA internship for Polo Ralph Lauren based out of New York. And that was a very good experience. It taught me a lot about retail, branding, and luxury goods.
What did you
After
do there? Sorry,
graduation,
what did you do at Ralph
uh,
Lauren?
I was an intern. I was a management intern at one of the
Ah,
flagship stores. And afterwards, I got hired by the Japanese media company called Sanrio.
yep.
It's a Japanese media company that owns Hello Kitty.
Okay.
So I was based from the U.S. office in San Francisco. So I did a year as the business development manager in San Francisco. But I was kind of like the internal consultant. And then I did a year. The company sent me to L.A. And then afterwards, the company sent me to Shanghai for 2 years, managing the China office as GM. And at that point, I thought I'd been at the company long enough. I had done everything I could, and I thought I had learned a lot. So maybe it was time to move on. And the question became, okay, do I join another major media company or another multinational, or do I try and start my own thing? And that was at that intersection where I met my current partner, who's the editor-in-chief. We had this idea. We thought it would be interesting to try. And to answer your question, it just fundamentally got down to that thought where, we saw a problem in everyday life. We thought we had a business idea that had a chance of succeeding, and everyone was complaining about it. And instead of just complaining about it with everyone else, then why not try it ourselves? It was, like I said, instead of blaming or complaining or saying it's everyone else's fault, why not try to actually create the business model or a media company that we thought we wanted to see?
That is such the entrepreneur spirit. That is just, not many people can do that though.
Yeah, but it was at that moment where we thought, okay, if not now, then when, right?
Exactly.
My gut feeling is, entrepreneurship gets harder and harder the older you get. So I didn't want to wait until I was 40 and 50 and spending 25 years in corporate and thinking, I should have started my own company when I was 30. It would have been too late then. So
Exactly. So can you tell us a little bit about the whole process of getting the seed funding from Marcus Brauchli and Sasa
Marcus
Vucinic?
Brauchli and Sasa Vucinic, yes.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
What's the process like? So you said that they contacted you guys. Did you guys just
Yeah.
get an email all of a sudden in one day and just say, hey, we want to invest in your company? Or can you describe the process for us?
Yeah, so like you said, out of nowhere, we actually got an email from them, and they were setting up this fund that was specifically investing in digital and independent media companies around the world, but especially in growing markets. And we would become their first investment. So they shot us an email saying this is what they're doing, this is their background. One of them used to be the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post. One of them used to handle the Media Development Fund in cooperation with George Soros. So they had a lot of media/investment experience, and they emailed us saying, what you guys are doing right now fits exactly what we're looking for. Do you have time for a Skype? So we Skyped back and forth for a couple of weeks. A month later, Sasha flew over from Singapore and Malaysia, where he's based. We had a very nice conversation with him. It's kind of like the first date. And
And you guys were the girl next door, yeah?
Yeah. At least that's what that's the image we're trying to give out, right?
Exactly.
And a month later, Marcus flew over from New York and Washington to kind of make sure we negotiated during then, and we signed a deal. From the first email all the way to confirming the deal, it was probably less than 3 months. It was pretty fast.
Oh, yeah, wow, that's very good. Man, now I want to finish this interview up with your books. You were able to come out and write 6 books before you were before you even did all of this, and during the time you were in school, even after school, right? I mean, I'm looking at some of these books, and some of them were your how to succeed in MBA. And sorry, I'm just trying to translate this into English.
Sure.
Chinese, and there's a 22-year-old something to do with not regretting your decision.
Yeah. Don't believe all the titles, right? They're very Chinese-based thinking when it comes to marketing a good title. But usually the books are not necessarily literally about that. No. To answer your question, I mean, my undergrad was in liberal arts, literature. So I mean, I used to write a lot to begin with. I did have some experience being a reporter before business school, and I published my first book when I was still in college. So for me, writing was always a passion. It was always fun. And since I had that experience, after I started my business experience in my business career. I knew editors, I knew publishing houses, and it just kind of came up by accident. It would be kind of like, oh, you graduated from business school. Would you be interested to write a book about your business school experiences? So it's not really about how to succeed in business school. It's just more about sharing what it's like, to go through 2 years in business school. And then after I graduated and I started working in the U.S., then your editorial friends would say, "Oh, it's been 2 years now. Do you want to write about how it's like to work in an international corporation overseas, and how is it different from working in Asia or Greater China?" And then 2 years later, they would say, "Oh, you're now living in Shanghai. Do you want to write about share your experiences to your readers about how it's different working in Shanghai, in China, in a fast-growing economy, and how this differs from working in the U.S., working with Americans, or working with Chinese or Taiwanese." And then now, 2 years later, that and you're starting your own company. Do you want to share experiences about making that transition post-graduation, going to a big company, leaving a big company, starting your own company, and the lessons that people would find interesting. So it kind of happened by accident. It was just kind of like a natural progression.
It's very, very, very empowering to hear people like you able to do all of this and to move from different industries, within such a short period of time and to be successful in many of them. Thank you, Joy, for taking your time with us today, and it was our pleasure to interview you. So for more information on The News Lens, please go to www.thenewslens.com. There's an app yet, or no app yet?
Yeah, the app is going up in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that.
For both Android and iOS, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And also for our viewers, if perhaps yourself or if you know anyone who is disrupting, risk-taking, or even making a difference in Asia, please let us know. We would love to showcase them. Thank you for watching. I'm Donnie Chen for ThisWeekIn.Asia. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.